Imagine a case so tangled, so shrouded in mystery, that even the most seasoned detectives are left scratching their heads. Welcome to Stephenville, Texas, where in the late summer of 1987, the tranquility of this small town was shattered by a heinous crime that continues to baffle to this day. Susan Woods, a woman known for her quiet demeanor and shy nature, was found violated and lifeless in the sanctuary of her own home. The shockwave that followed was palpable. It was a crime that was not only brutal, but deeply personal, shaking the very foundations of this tight-knit community. The town was left reeling, a shared sense of horror and disbelief echoing through the quiet streets of Stephenville. But what made this case even more chilling was the trail of tangible, yet elusive clues. Fingerprints and palm prints were found at the scene, whispering the promise of justice, and yet they led nowhere. In an era when forensic technology was still in its infancy, these pieces of the puzzle were frustratingly out of reach. Detectives pored over the evidence, their determination fueled by the haunting image of Susan Woods and the brutal end she met. Yet despite their best efforts, the case seemed to be shrouded in an impenetrable fog of mystery. The leads they had were like ghosts, flickering and vanishing before they could be grasped. The tantalizing hope of resolution was always just a step ahead, forever out of reach. As the years passed, the case grew colder and colder, leaving the town in a constant state of unease. The spectre of Susan Woods' tragedy continued to loom large, casting a long, dark shadow over the community. The question of who committed this horrific crime and why remained unanswered, turning this once peaceful town into a landscape of lingering questions and unsolved mysteries. Enter Detective Donnie Hensley, a man with a reputation for cracking the toughest cases. A seasoned investigator, Hensley was known for his tenacity and sharp intuition. When the Susan Woods case landed on his desk, it was like a puzzle waiting to be solved, a mystery begging to be unraveled. With the initial investigation hitting a brick wall, Hensley dove headfirst into the case, meticulously combing through every piece of available evidence. The physical evidence was there, fingerprints and palm prints, but the technology of the time was not sophisticated enough to provide clear answers. A key detail stood out to Hensley: the lack of forced entry. This wasn't a random act of violence. It wasn't a break-in gone wrong. This was personal. Someone Susan knew, someone she trusted, was behind this monstrous act. The mystery deepened, the plot thickened, and the list of suspects grew. Hensley started to piece together a picture of Susan's life, interviewing those who knew her, trying to identify anyone who might bear a grudge, anyone who might have had a reason to hurt her. He painstakingly dissected her relationships, looking for any signs of conflict, any hint of animosity. In any murder case, the first stage of the investigation is to identify potential suspects. In the case of Susan Woods, a quiet woman whose life was abruptly ended in the quiet town of Stephenville, Texas, the list of suspects was deceptively short. The investigation turned towards those who knew Susan. As the saying goes, the killer is always someone you know. And in this case, the lack of forced entry suggested that Susan's killer was no stranger to her. The first person to come under the microscope was a local bartender named J.C. Borman. Susan's friends recalled a troubling encounter she had with Borman. The details of this encounter were hazy, shrouded in whispers and half-remembered conversations. However, despite the cloud of suspicion that hung over him, Borman was eventually cleared as a suspect. He was not the man who had ended Susan's life. Then there was Roy Hayes, a man who had become somewhat entangled in Susan's life and who had a known interest in the fantasy game, Dungeons and Dragons. The game's dark and mythical underpinnings painted a sinister picture, and for a time it seemed as though Hayes might be the key to solving the case. Yet, just like Borman, Hayes was put through the ringer of investigation and came out the other side, passing a polygraph test and subsequently being cleared of any involvement in Susan's murder. The tragedy of Susan Woods' murder was compounded by the frustration of an investigation that seemed to lead only to dead ends. Both Borman and Hayes, men who had been part of Susan's life and who had initially seemed like plausible suspects, were found to be innocent of her murder. But if these men didn't kill Susan Woods, then who did? Who was responsible for the senseless end of a quiet, shy woman who had never harmed anyone? The answers were as elusive as the Texas wind, leaving the community of Stephenville, and indeed the world, asking one chilling question. With both suspects cleared, the question remained: who killed Susan Woods? As the list of suspects dwindled, so did the hope of ever finding Susan's killer. This was the grim reality that Detective Donnie Hensley faced as the investigation into Susan Woods' murder hit a dead end. The once bustling and buzzing investigation room turned into a quiet, somber space, a chilling reminder of the cold case that Susan's murder had become. Each lead, each suspect, each possibility had been painstakingly investigated, and yet the answers remained elusive. The physical evidence seemed to taunt them, fingerprints and palm prints that were as useless as the silence of the grave. Despite the advancements in forensic technology, the identity of Susan's killer remained hidden, as if shrouded in an impenetrable fog. The initial hope that had been sparked by the involvement of Detective Hensley had faded into a dull ache of disappointment. The detective, known for his dogged determination and sharp mind, had come up empty. The case that had once promised answers now only offered more questions. The frustration was palpable, the despair overwhelming. The lack of forced entry suggested that the killer was someone Susan knew, someone she had let into her home, into her life. But who? The interviews with Susan's friends had offered a glimmer of hope, pointing towards a bartender named J.C. Borman and a man named Roy Hayes. But both were cleared as suspects, their innocence only deepening the mystery surrounding Susan's murder. As the case grew colder, the town of Stephenville was left to grapple with the horrifying reality that Susan's killer was still out there, possibly walking amongst them, a shadowy figure lurking in the dark corners of their quiet town. But even in the face of despair, one must never lose hope. For sometimes, it is in the darkest of times that the faintest glimmers of light become visible. And perhaps, just perhaps, the answers they were seeking were not as far away as they seemed. In the wake of Susan's murder, the town of Stephenville was forever changed. Touched by the tragedy of Susan Woods' untimely demise, a blanket of heavy silence fell over the quiet Texas town. The unsolved murder case, like an open wound, refused to heal, leaving a permanent scar on the collective consciousness of Stephenville. In the immediate aftermath, the town's tranquil facade was disrupted, replaced by an atmosphere of fear and paranoia. The townsfolk, once carefree, now locked their doors and looked over their shoulders as they walked down the street. The thought that Susan's killer could be walking among them was a chilling reality that no one could ignore. Susan's friends and family, in particular, felt the impact of her loss deeply. Day by day, they were forced to grapple with the harsh reality of her absence. The void she left behind was vast, her laughter and warmth replaced by a silence that echoed through their homes and their hearts. As for Susan's parents, they were left with the unbearable task of burying their daughter. Their lives were irrevocably shattered, their hopes and dreams for their child cruelly extinguished. The void in their lives was a constant reminder of the tragedy that had befallen their family. The longing for justice was a thirst that remained unquenched. Detective Donnie Hensley, who had taken over the investigation, was also deeply impacted. The case had consumed him, the image of Susan's lifeless body haunting his dreams. He had pledged to find her killer, but as the years went by, the promise felt more like a burden. Despite tireless efforts, the case remained cold, a constant reminder of his failure to bring Susan's killer to justice. The case of Susan Woods' murder continued to hang over the town like a dark cloud. It became a part of the town's history, a chilling tale told in hushed whispers. The case, with its many twists and turns, became a grim reminder of the fragility of life and the unknown dangers that lurk in the shadows. Yet the question still looms: who killed Susan Woods? Despite the passage of time, the mystery of her murder remains unsolved, leaving a chilling question mark on the narrative of Stephenville. The story of Susan Woods is a stark reminder of the grim reality that sometimes justice remains elusive and some mysteries remain unsolved. As we delve deeper into this chilling case, we're left with more questions than answers. The quiet and shy Susan Woods, whose life was brutally snuffed out in the comfort of her own home, remains a haunting figure in the annals of Stephenville, Texas. Her case, despite the presence of physical evidence such as fingerprints and palm prints, remains shrouded in mystery, a chilling reminder of the limitations of forensic technology in the late 80s. The dedicated efforts of Detective Donnie Hensley, who took over the investigation after initial efforts hit a dead end, have been remarkable. He focused on the possibility that the killer was someone Susan knew, given the lack of forced entry. This led to the questioning of J.C. Borman, a bartender, and Roy Hayes, a known associate of Susan with a penchant for Dungeons and Dragons. Yet both were cleared as suspects, leaving the case as cold as the winters in Stephenville. Susan's story underscores the need for advanced forensic technology. Her case is a stark reminder that justice can be elusive, and the search for truth doesn't end when the trail goes cold. It's a call to arms for us to never give up on cold cases, to relentlessly pursue every lead, every clue, in the hope that one day justice will be served. Thank you for joining us on this chilling journey. If you're intrigued by this case and want to delve deeper into the world of true crime, be sure to check out the other 2 videos appearing on your screen now. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more spine-chilling stories. Until next time, stay curious and stay vigilant.